Welcome to literary and jury charge practice. Let's start out with some literary material. Ready? Here we go. Gliding beneath the waves and canoodling with sea creatures as a mermaid is no longer just the stuff of little girl dreams. A new mermaid school on Maui can turn you into Ariel for a day. In a 2-hour private lesson, Hawaii Mermaid Adventures teaches participants how to swim in a monofin tail suit and then leads the new mermaids on a tour of the reef. While many aspiring mer people, the activity also draws men, are intimidated by the dolphin kick, they're surprised to find that the fin gives them a powerful push through the water, and most pick it up quickly, says head mermaid Lila Jones. Before long, they're diving under the water, doing backflips, blowing mermaid kisses, and swimming with turtles, she says. Underwater photography is included in the tour. A marine biologist by training, Jones conceived of the tour as a lighthearted way to teach visitors about marine life and the importance of protecting the sea. It's education disguised as a lot of fun, she says. The company also sells tails you can take home. Private mermaid lessons start at $139. All right, then let's try some jury charge practice. Ready? Here we go. Although the third count charges the defendant as a principal actor under the murder statute, you may, as an alternative, find the defendant guilty under a theory of accessorial liability pursuant to Section 53(8)(28) of the Connecticut General Statutes. I have already instructed you on the elements of being an accessory to the crime of murder in my charge on the first count, and I need not repeat that instruction. The elements that the state must prove under these circumstances are set forth in my charge on the second count, and I need not repeat that instruction. You will, of course, understand that with respect to the third count, the alleged victim is Michaela Pettit. If you find that the state has proven each of these elements beyond a reasonable doubt, you must find the defendant guilty as charged. If you find that the state has failed to prove one or more elements beyond a reasonable doubt, you must find him not guilty. The 4th, 5th, 10th, 11th, 12th, and 14th counts of the information allege 6 separate violations of the crime of capital felony as defined in various subsections of Section 53A to 54B of the Connecticut General Statutes. I think that it will help you understand these counts if I first read you the entire portion of this statute pertaining to these counts. I will later specifically discuss the allegations and statutory language pertaining to each of those counts when I discuss those specific counts. Section 53A to 54B of the Connecticut General Statutes provides that a person is guilty of a capital felony who is convicted of any of the following: 5. Murder by a kidnapper of a kidnapped person during the course of the kidnapping. 6. Murder committed in the course of the commission of sexual assault in the first degree. 7. Murder of 2 or more persons in the course of a single transaction. Or 8. Murder of a person under 16 years of age. I will now return to my review of the various counts contained in the information. The 4th count accuses Joshua Commissar of capital felony and charges that at the town of Cheshire on or about the 23rd day of July 2007 between 3 a.m. and 10 a.m. at 300 Sorghum Mill Drive, the said Joshua Commissar, with the intent to cause the deaths of 2 or more persons, to wit Jennifer Hawk Pettit, Haley Pettit, and Michaela Pettit, did cause the deaths of such persons in the course of a single transaction in violation of Section 53A to 54B7 of the Connecticut General Statutes. Section 53A to 54B7 of the Connecticut General Statutes provides that a person is guilty of capital felony felony who is convicted of murder of 2 or more persons at the same time or in the course of a single transaction. For you to find the defendant guilty of this charge, the state must prove each of the following elements beyond a reasonable doubt. 1, that the defendant has been convicted of the murders of Jennifer Hawk Pettit, Haley Pettit, and Michaela Pettit, and 2, that these murders occurred at the same time or in the course of a single transaction. The first element that the state must prove beyond a reasonable doubt is that the defendant has been convicted of the murders of Jennifer Hawk Pettit, Haley Pettit, and Michaela Pettit. Proof of this element will depend on your verdicts with respect to the first, second, and third counts. If and only if you find the defendant guilty as charged on each of the first, second, and third counts, this element of the fourth count will have been proven. If you deliver a verdict of not guilty on one or more of the first, second, and third counts, this element will not have been proven. The second element that the state must prove beyond a reasonable doubt is that these murders occurred at the same time or in the course of a single transaction. The state must prove that the murders occurred at approximately the same time or that the murders were related to a single course of conduct or plan carried out in a series of events and with a clear connection. Was there a plan, motive, or event common to the 3 murders? If you find that all of the murders occurred as a part of a single course of conduct with a clear connection, then you shall find this element to have been proven. If you find that the state has proven all the elements of capital felony, there is one other rule that applies to the crime of capital felony you must also consider. Our law provides that no person may be convicted of any crime punishable by death without the testimony of at least 2 witnesses or that which is equivalent thereto. It is our law in most criminal cases that a person can be convicted on the testimony of just 1 person. However, in a charge of capital felony, the state is required to produce more than a single witness. There is no requirement that there be 2 eyewitnesses to the crime, only that there has been produced for you the testimony of at least 2 witnesses or the equivalent thereto. In this case, when you recall the evidence you have heard and consider the number of witnesses called by the state in support of this charge of capital felony, you may find that the state has met its additional evidentiary burden of calling at least 2 witnesses or that which is equivalent thereto. The rule is satisfied if there are 2 or more witnesses, each testifying to different parts of the crimes or to different circumstances concerning the charge, tending directly to show the guilt of the defendant. The rule is also satisfied if one witness testifies to a principal fact and another witness testifies to circumstances corroborating it. If you find that the state has called 2 witnesses or the equivalent thereto and proven each of these elements beyond a reasonable doubt, you must find the defendant guilty as charged. If you find that the state has not called 2 witnesses or the equivalent thereto or failed to prove 1 or more of these elements beyond a reasonable doubt, you must find him not guilty. The 5th count accuses Joshua Commissar of capital felony and charges that at the town of Cheshire on or about the 23rd day of July 2007 between 3 a.m. and 10 a.m. at 300 Sorghum Mill Drive, the said Joshua Commissar was with intent to cause the death of a person, to wit Michaela Pettit, did cause her death, and she was under 16 years of age in violation of section 53A to 54B8 of the Connecticut General Statutes. Now let's try some literary material. Let's see what we have here. All right, ready? Here we go. The Roundhouse Aquarium at the end of the pier is open every day, weather permitting. Stop by for free or make a donation to see and touch a small collection of marine life. Manhattan Beach Pier, 310-379-8117. The Strand is a pedestrian-only road that separates the sand from beachfront properties. Walk, bike, or skate on its smooth concrete surface all the way north to Santa Monica or south to Hermosa Beach and Redondo Beach, named for the ceramics plant that once stood on the site for much of the 20th century. Metlux Plaza is an open-air shopping center and restaurant hub set a few blocks from the pier. Bring the kids to play in the courtyard, fountain, and grass. 451 Manhattan Beach Boulevard, 626-535-0318. Pick up a beach read at the Independent Bookstore. Pages, where regular events include author signings, book club discussions, and children's story times. 904 Manhattan Avenue, 310-318-0900. To imagine what early settlers saw when they first arrived in Manhattan Beach, visit Sand Dune Park to gaze up at the 100-foot tall dune before climbing it. Kids can bring a piece of cardboard for sledding. Online reservations are required for adults. 33rd Street and Ball Avenue, 310-802-5448. Play a game of billiards and order up a round of drinks, cash only, at the beloved dive bar Urkel's, which opened in 1927. 1101 Manhattan Avenue, 310-372-1997. All right, back to some jury charge practice. Ready? Here we go. Section 53A to 54B8 of the Connecticut General Statutes provides that a person is guilty of a capital felony who is convicted of murder of a person under 16 years of age. For you to find the defendant guilty of this charge, the state must prove each of the following elements beyond a reasonable doubt. 1, that the defendant was convicted of the murder of Michaela Pettit, and 2, that at the time Michaela Pettit was murdered, she was under 16 years of age. The first element that the state must prove beyond a reasonable doubt is that the defendant was convicted of the murder of Michaela Pettit. Proof of this element will depend on your verdict as to the third count. If you find the defendant guilty as charged in the third count, then this element of the fifth count will have been proven. If you find the defendant not guilty of murder on the third count, then this element of the fifth count will not have been proven. The second element that the state must prove beyond a reasonable doubt is that at the time Michaela Pettit was murdered, she was under 16 years of age. The two-witness rule, which I have discussed in my instruction on the fourth count, applies to the fifth count as well. I need not repeat that discussion. If you find that the state has called two witnesses or the equivalent thereto and proven each of these elements beyond a reasonable doubt, you must find the defendant guilty as charged. If you find that the state has not called two witnesses or the equivalent thereto, or failed to prove one or more of these elements beyond a reasonable doubt, you must find him not guilty. The sixth count accuses John Commissar of kidnapping in the first degree and charges that at the town of Cheshire on or about the 23rd day of July 2007 between 3 a.m. and 10 a.m. at 300 Sorghum Mill Drive, the said Joshua Commissar abducted another person, to wit William Pettit, and he restrained the person abducted with the intent to accomplish and advance the commission of a felony, to wit larceny in the first degree in violation of sections 53A to 92A2B and 53A to 122A2 of the Connecticut General Statutes. Section 53A to 92A2B of the Connecticut General Statutes provides that a person is guilty of kidnapping in the first degree when he abducts another person and he restrains the person abducted with intent to accomplish or advance the commission of a felony. For you to find the defendant guilty of this charge, the state must prove each of the following elements beyond a reasonable doubt. 1, that the defendant abducted another person, namely William Pettit, and 2, that he restrained William Pettit with the specific intent to accomplish or advance the commission of larceny in the first degree. The first element that the state must prove beyond a reasonable doubt is that the defendant abducted another person, namely William Pettit. Abduct means to restrain a person with intent to prevent his liberation by either secreting or holding him in a place where he is not likely to be found, or using or threatening to use physical force or intimidation. Restrain means to restrict a person's movements intentionally and unlawfully in such a manner as to interfere substantially with his liberty by moving him from one place to another, or by confining him either in the place where the restriction commences or in a place to which he has been moved without consent. Without consent means, but is not limited to, deception in any means whatever. Any apparent consent on the part of the alleged victim to the movement or confinement must have been actual and not simply acquiescence brought about by force, fear, shock, or deception. The second element that the state must prove beyond a reasonable doubt is that the defendant restrained William Pettit with the specific intent to accomplish or advance the commission of larceny in the first degree. The crime of larceny in the first degree is a felony. It is not necessary that actual commission of larceny in the first degree be proven as long as you determine that the defendant intended to commit larceny in the first degree and abducted William Pettit with that intent. In abducting the alleged victim, the defendant must have specifically intended to prevent his liberation. I have already instructed you on the law of intent in my charge on the first count, and I need not repeat that instruction. To establish the intent required for abduction, the state must prove that the defendant intended to prevent the alleged victim's liberation for a longer period of time, or to a greater degree than that which was necessary to commit another crime against that person. In this regard, the defendant's intent to prevent the alleged victim's liberation may be manifested by confinement or movement that is more than merely incidental to the other offense. If the confinement or movement was so much a part of the other offense that it could not have been committed without such acts, then the requisite intent to prevent the alleged victim's liberation has not been established. There is, however, no minimal period of confinement or degree of movement necessary to establish kidnapping. Whether the movement or confinement of the alleged victim was merely incidental to another offense is a question of fact for you to determine. In determining whether the defendant intended to prevent the alleged victim's liberation beyond the degree necessary to commit the other offense, you may consider all of the relevant facts and circumstances of the case, including but not limited to the following factors. 1. The nature and duration of the alleged victim's movement or confinement by the defendant. 2. Whether that movement or confinement occurred during the commission of the separate offenses. 3. Whether the restraint was inherent in the nature of the separate offense. 4. Whether the restraint prevented the alleged victim from summoning assistance. 5. Whether the restraint reduced the defendant's risk of detention. And 7. Whether the restraint created a significant danger or increased the alleged victim's risk of harm, independent of that posed by the separate offense. You must consider all of the evidence when deciding what, if anything, the defendant intended. All right, let's see what we have for a little more literary practice. This is called Magnificent Mosaic. At 150, Canada celebrates its rich multicultural heritage. Ready? Here we go. On a chilly winter night in Vancouver, British Columbia, I sit inside a packed Dynasty dumpling house and bite into the soft pillow of a pork soup dumpling. A burst of savory juice paints my taste buds. The morsel is a departure from the Cantonese-style Chinese cuisine North Americans are most familiar with, and it intrigues me. I ask my evening's guide, Condria Fung, about its provenance. In Vancouver, we have every kind of Chinese food there is. This is Northern Chinese style, explains the radio host and Hong Kong-born immigrant to Canada. My dining truck on Vancouver's Robeson Avenue demonstrates not only that visiting Canada uncovers fresh cosmopolitan delights, it also illustrates how our northerly neighbor's very character makes this so. As Canada celebrates its 150th anniversary on July 1, it's both a great time to visit and a compelling occasion to reflect on the country's tolerant and welcoming nature. All right, we will get back to that one. But for now, that will conclude our literary and jury charge practice.